Welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. Today, I've got a financial planner on. We are going to talk about, obviously, financial planning. Obviously, it's something that every single one of us really needs to pay attention to. But we're not going to talk about your simple stuff like buying a couple of stocks here and there or budgeting, things like that. I've talked about that before. There's other episodes on that. My guest today wants to talk to us about some lesser known products that he offers, and I'm really excited to learn myself about some of the different products that are out there on financial planning that maybe could be useful for you. So if you're looking to invest your money, to save your money, looking at some different options, you might want to pay attention today.
Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
So Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad to have you on. And I told you right before we started, I'm in real estate, and I don't know everything about personal finance and stuff like that, but I do kind of nerd out on it. I do love talking about it. So I personally am excited to hear what you have to say about some of these lesser known things. But before we dive into it, tell us a little bit about yourself and your military story.
All right. Military story. Well, let's see. I graduated high school in 2011 and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was a terrible student. I was a very undisciplined person. And it was kind of coming to a point of I need to get my butt kicked and I need to do it somewhere. And I can't get it here. So I remember this is where my head was at when I decided to join the military. I said, I don't want to get shot at, so I'm not joining the Marines or the Army, which now I know as a future, as a veteran and everything, you don't get shot at everywhere there. So it was between Air Force and Navy for me. And I Googled where the nearest Air Force recruiter was. And I'm in the St. Louis area. They were in South County, which is about a 20-minute drive. And I Googled where the nearest Navy recruiter was. He was about 5 minutes down the road. So I went and joined the Navy. Not the best thought process for, making a life-changing decision, but that was the thought process I had. So,
Well, hey, 5 minutes is a lot closer than 20 or 25. And,
yeah.
I can't argue with your thought process because I joined the Air Force, and my stepdad kind of said the same thing. He was Air Force during Vietnam. And he went out with the Marines a lot. He did, some missions out on the ground. But he was like, "Do you want to sleep on the ground? Do you want to get shot at? Do you want to have a good quality of life?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. What kind of question is that?" And he's like, "Join the Air Force or the Navy." And so my thought process was not about what's closer. Back then, I would have had to use MapQuest, but I looked at it like, what sounds better? I'm like, well, the Air Force worked for him.
Mhm.
And my friend's dad was Air Force in Vietnam. I was like, Air Force worked for these guys. And then I was like, do I really want to float out in the middle of the ocean in a tin can surrounded by sharks? And the answer to me was like, no, I really don't. That does not sound appealing to me. So Air Force is the direction I went. But yeah, I think we were kind of on a very similar
Yeah,
brainwave. And it
I
sounds
had a
like,
similar thing where I looked at my two grandparents. Both of my grandfathers served. One of them served in the Navy. One of them served in the Air Force. The one who served in the Air Force uh, had some issues later in life that didn't help him out a whole lot. And overall, alcoholism was a terrible thing for a lot of people, and it was a terrible thing for him. My other grandfather was a engineer at McDonnell Douglas. He helped us. He was, I believe, don't quote me on this, but he said something along the lines of he was the one who helped figure out planes not getting struck by lightning. So he was that kind of engineer way back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he was doing great. So I was like, well, I see this guy went Air Force and it didn't go, like his life didn't turn out as well. This guy went Navy. It's a very small sample size to choose from, two different scenarios. So that was another small piece as to why I might have convinced myself Navy. So yeah, I went in 2012 and was an undesignated seaman, which if you are if the Navy people out there that are on the enlisted side would recognize that those are people that usually got told, hey, you get to go to a ship and pick any job you want. And in reality, it is, no, you show up to a ship, you don't have a job, so you get to do the ones that nobody wants to do.
I would say that's the
Congratulations.
recruiting pitch is you get to pick whatever job you want. That's not the reality. Yep.
Yeah. So I did that undesignated side for 2.5 years, which is a year longer than you're supposed to, but it was hard to get a job title at the time. We were kind of overmanned. But eventually I was an electrician's mate. So I did that for the last 1.5 years. I got into a rough car accident right around my 3rd year mark. And about 8 months of that military service portion was recovering and trying to get back to a ship. I ended up getting back to my ship pretty much in time to go. I've already enrolled at college. I am getting out. I know this is my 4 years is up. I know what I want to do with my life. I figured out that question that I had whenever I was 18 years old. And I figured out that I could go to school. I could do things that wouldn't be as difficult, and I knew that it was the discipline that I needed. I got, and so it was some of the questions I get asked. How was my military service? A lot, and the answer I kind of give sometimes I say is it sucked. Best decision I ever made in my life.
I would think most people would probably say about the same thing.
Yeah,
A lot of it sucked,
yeah,
but I'd gladly do most of it again.
yeah. Most
of it.
Yeah.
There's certain parts of it that most of us would probably rather not do, but in the grand scheme of it, yeah, if push comes to shove, you do it again.
Yeah.
But
and now that I'm kind of at the, I'm now 9 years removed from military service, and seeing all of the benefits and stuff that I get from that, I would 110% do all of it all over again, just because I'm seeing, between VA home loan, which I know you're in real estate, you work with a lot, I'm sure, VA healthcare and things like that. VA healthcare is something that has allowed me to run my own business and do these things that I might not be able to do, because health insurance is expensive, and especially if you are a independent business owner. And it also paid for my college. So after military service, I went to community college for a year, and then went to a school here in the St. Louis area called Maryville University, where I got a bachelor's in financial services. So my last little piece after that, I started working at Merrill Lynch, which was where I got trained and everything. And COVID really threw a wrench in a lot of that, as it did for a lot of people with a lot of things. So I ended up doing paycheck protection program loans for them, because all of our testing centers were shut down. So I became a loan specialist with zero training, and it was very much military helped out with that. Hey, you're getting deployed to something and you have no idea what to expect. A lot of people couldn't take it, but some people did well, and I think I did well with it because of military training. It definitely helped out, knowing that you were kind of almost getting deployed to an area that you didn't want to go to. So that was kind of my spot. And then finally I got my testing done, I got my training done, and then they said, hey, we got a new batch of PPP funding. You're going back to doing loans. And I said, no, I'm not. And I decided to go to the independent side, and that's where I'm at now with SD Smith Financial. We're an independent broker or independent financial advising firm located in St. Louis that, and our broker dealer, I have to do these little disclosures, sorry. My broker dealer is Cetera Advisors LLC, and we are independent of Cetera Advisors LLC. So the opinions that are here are my own, not Cetera's. Please don't go after them. They get mad at me if you do. So
there you go. And if you want to learn more about them, I've got it scrolling across the bottom. It'll be in the show notes as well. So as well as your little description there. So I totally get that. Yeah, I totally understand being in the real estate field. There's always disclosures upon disclosures upon disclosures, and then disclosures about those disclosures. So I totally get it. So First question I wanted to ask you is, I think it's a very interesting one, and I'm very curious to hear your answer because of what you see on your end. But what do you see as the three biggest mistakes, or two or three, four, whatever you want to, however you want to answer it, that you see veterans making with their money?
So most of the people that I've worked with are vets that are either they've done their military service, they are now approaching. They went and did the old double dip where they started working somewhere else while they got their pension, and then they're approaching retirement now. And then the other side is people who are in the middle of transitioning out of the military, either after 20, 30 years. The biggest mistake I've seen isn't even really as much financial side as it is they put themselves into way too much of a workload immediately once they leave the military. So they might leave the military after I've talked with a couple of people that they leave the military and their separation date is March 31st and they start their new job on April 4th. And when you do that, and I was a victim of this as well. I set up my schooling to be literally I had to get my DD 214, drive 14 hours, and show up to class. Which it makes the transition process to where you are so solely focused on one thing that you miss the big picture of all of the different things that you could be adding to your situation, such as applying for VA disability, things like that, that you should be doing, and you maybe put it off, or you put off some other stuff that you should be doing, or your family gets put behind in the back burner, things like that. Because you also, we talked about the recruiter pitch earlier. Well, these companies have recruiters too. That's who you're talking to, is a recruiter, and they're going to make it sound like the transition is going to be the smoothest thing you've ever done. And that sometimes isn't the case. I have one guy that I'm working with right now that he's gotten sent from, he got out at Scott Air Force Base here in the St. Louis area and was starting a job with Delta. And then he had to fly to Miami, and then he had to fly to New York, and then he was flying up to Indiana, and then he was flying back to St. Louis. And he almost missed his daughter's graduation because he bit off a lot more than he could chew initially, instead of maybe taking a month off to really get an idea as to what they were getting into. Now, the other side that I've seen issues with, um, specifically with people who are retiring from the military who maybe don't have, we talk about financial literacy is something that in this country is undereducated on most of the time because they kind of expect parents to do it. And if your parents weren't financially literate, then, you're not. And it's kind of, you have to seek that out yourself. So we've seen some people who maybe they get out and they've saved 150,000 in their TSP and they have their pension and they're like, I can live off of this. This is no problem. And they try to pull money out of their TSP and they don't know that there's a 10% penalty that comes with that because they're not 59 and a half. And we can kind of get into some of those IRS and IRA rules and regulations later into the pod, but that is kind of an area that I see a lot of people screw up because then they get back to tax time and they go, holy crap, I owe way more money than I thought. Oh no, now I need to go get a job. Well, and I need a job yesterday. And I
Yeah,
didn't
I
know
can
that I
totally
needed
see that one playing out. I mean, it's the taxes, the fees, those kind of things. I mean, those are retirement plans.
yeah.
Typical retirement age is 65, not 40, not 35, not 30. So I can totally see that. People say, "Oh, yeah, I can just pull 10 out. I can pull 20 out and buy this new car. I can do
Hmm.
whatever. I can live off of that." Now, you're not going to live off 150 grand for the next 30, 40, 50. Well, you get out of 40, you
You
still
could
have
do.
another 25 years of work life of prime work years, right? Until the typical retirement age. Then you still, if you're lucky, you still have another 15, 20 years left of life until that, you know, let's just say 15 more years until the
Mhm.
typical searching for the
So
word now, you know. life expectancy date, right? That's a long time to live.
Yeah.
$150,000 is not going to work. $150,000 is not going to fund you even in a retirement home.
Yeah. I've only sat down with one current military member who kind of had it set up to where, and this is an advice that I give to a lot of people that is obviously it's not a blanket recommendation, it's situation specific. But if you do not want to work after your military service, if you want to be done working after your military service, you almost always have to do 30 years. You have to get that 75% pension, that 50% pension at 20 years. You're going to have to do something. Now, maybe while you were if you maybe invested in real estate and you have rental income coming in or some other form of passive income, you can maybe make that work. But typically, 30 years is what you would need if you don't want to work again. Now, likewise, if you plan on working whenever you get out, and you plan on continuing to do a job that maybe you'll even pay more than what you're currently getting paid to do in the military, which is we all kind of see that because the military's compensation package it's not all in their base pay, right? Some of these companies, it's all in their base pay. Their base pay is where their
Yep.
compensation package is. Whereas your military, it is basic housing allowance. It's healthcare benefits that are you know, we may all talk about how, at least on my ship, we talked about how the corpsman would, if you went down there and said you were sick or something, they'd give you ibuprofen, tell you to change your socks, and send you on your merry way.
Oh, don't forget to hydrate.
Yeah, don't forget to hydrate. That was the other one. But at the end of the day, it is still free healthcare, and most of the country doesn't get that.
Yeah, it's
It's
it's not easy and clean to lay out if you're put it into a spreadsheet.
mhm,
Because yeah, if you have the civilian company and they say, hey, we're going to pay you, just use random numbers, but $75,000 a year to do this job with just a couple of benefits. It's not really, you could kind of just throw the numbers in there, but the military, it's not easy to kind of throw in what those benefits are for the free healthcare and tuition assistance and housing allowance and all, and other things. Or if you happen to deploy overseas and now you got some tax-free money,
mhm,
and all these different things that can be in there. It's then if you get out and if you have a disability, how many dependents do you have? Like there's a lot
mhm.
of factors that you have to take into account. A lot more columns on that
Yeah.
spreadsheet for sure.
And that's something that I've sat down with a good amount of active duty members, and we go through that cash flow analysis of, okay, if you do leave the military after 23 years, what does your pension look like? What does your new job look like? What does it cost when it comes to your, are you planning on using VA healthcare? Are you planning on using TRICARE? Are you planning on using your employer's healthcare plan? Are you expecting to get VA disability? Are you expecting to, what are the areas that you're looking at and what are you expecting? And then let's also go through what if you don't get that? What if that's not like, go into the what if scenarios of what if you think you can leave the military and they're currently paying you, I'll go like random numbers, they're paying you a base pay of 50K a year, and then you're also getting your basic housing allowance, and it's, you're probably getting another 18 a year or so after that. Let's say you're at 68,000 at that point is what your total pay is, and this company tells you they're going to pay you $90,000, but then they also don't give you the TSP, which has a 5% match. Therefore, they don't have a 401k plan. They don't have, they don't have any life insurance that comes with their plan like the military does. That's another piece that a lot of people leave the military and don't think about. We typically, it all depends, but typically recommend that you should have roughly 8 to 12, depending on your home situation, 8 to 12 times your annual income is what you should have in life insurance most of the time. Uh, Now, military might not cover that with 400,000, but they cover a heck of a lot. Most employers will cover 1 year's salary. So if you leave and you went from having $400,000 of coverage, you now have 90. And if you were to unfortunately pass, your family gets 1 year of your income. That's it, to replace what you had. That's why we say typically if you do 10 to 12, depending on the situation, we can usually use that money to draw down and get that person through to retirement. And it's also when it comes to pension setup and stuff like that. That's other stuff that we assist with that's a little more in the weeds. But that's just kind of the area that we see with a lot of vets that are in the middle or transitioning military, I should say, whenever they are leaving, is we want to make sure that plan A looks great, but we want to make sure plan B, C, D, E, F, and G also look great.
Yeah, because most of the time it's not going to work out the way you want. And I mean, you mentioned life insurance, but health insurance is another one
Mm-hmm.
that I think a lot of vets kind of get hit by surprise with. And obviously, those costs can be all over the place, but it's just like
And
it can hit you like a brick. It really can, and like you said earlier, you kind of mentioned VA care. So I'm sure you've had these conversations with the vet, like, oh no, I'm gonna get out and go to the VA. Like man, ABC, X, Y, and Z are all wrong with me. And I think
mm-hmm.
based on what I see or what my VSO says, man, I'm a shoe in for 70%. Okay. Definitely is no guarantee that the
Yeah.
rater, VA, is ever going to agree with you, because you got to go in there and plead your case, right? You
Mm-hmm.
you may be worthy of that, right? You may have those legitimate disabilities that are service connected, but you still have to plead your case, and it is a long process,
Yeah.
and in a head scratching, difficult, stressful process with zero guarantees. So, like you said, you got to have that plan A, plan B, right? So you have to like throw that in your budget of like, all right, if this doesn't work, like, what's it going to cost me? You know,
Yeah.
insurance, health,
And
car insurance, like all those different factors.
VA healthcare wise, from what I know, and I'm not licensed to give advice or anything on VA healthcare stuff, but from what I can tell from talking to a lot of people, it's very localized. So depending on where you are, will depend on what kind of care you can actually get. I'm in the St. Louis area. Our VA healthcare system, great. I mean, we have 2 hospitals in the area. We got multiple different clinics with doctors, primary care doctors, things like that. But if you decide you want to go live on a farm, you want to go back to, the small town that you came from, your VA healthcare nearest facility might be 60 miles away. And if that's the case, you probably are going to want to use an employer healthcare plan to make sure that that piece is covered. And I got news for you: healthcare only gets more expensive as you get older.
Yeah. Well,
Because
the VA does have community care for
yeah,
some people who are in rural areas. I'm in one of those areas where I'm up in the Peoria, Illinois area, so I'm not that far from you. But like my VA hospital is in Danville. It's about 2.5, almost 3 hours away. So if I have to go to the hospital, I got to travel that far. Now I've got a clinic where my primary care physician is, which is great. Everybody there has been wonderful. But, those more difficult procedures or imaging and things like that, you either have to travel 2.5, 3 hours, or you have to get it community care. And it's not quick. It's not easy. Um, and I'm in a pretty well populated area.
yeah,
If you imagine out like West Coast, if gosh, I can only imagine if you're in like Montana or North Dakota or
mhm,
Wyoming, how many hours do you have to travel in difficult terrain to get to even a clinic? So like, yeah, your access could be difficult
yeah.
at best for some
Mhm.
people. So
Yeah, and that's an area that we plan for, and we make sure that it is going to be taken care of. And especially if I have a couple of people that are still that are a year and a half away from retirement, and they're planning on moving to Florida or they're moving to Alabama or something like that. So if that's the case, I make sure to ask them, like, what is your plan with that? Now, um, and then we also obviously hit on the investment side a lot. That's my bread and butter area. But and in this industry, um, you can't be everything to everybody, because then you end up being nothing to no one. So being a resource for veterans was kind of my area to succeed in this business. And I've got people that do VA home loans. I got people that help with VA disability filing, VA disability appeals, which I don't know if you've ever gone through a VA disability appeal out there, but holy cow, they take forever. I'm still waiting on an appeal that I put in March of 2017.
Yeah, like I said earlier, they are long, drawn out, head scratching, frustrating processes.
Yes.
It's not fun. It ain't for the faint of heart. So it's a lot of
No.
hurry up and wait on
Yes.
steroids.
Yeah.
I mean, all you can do sometimes is just laugh. It's, you know, the VA is what it is. It's a government organization. They do their
Mhm.
best. They have to have their systems and their checks and balances. But at the end of the day, it's a system.
Yeah.
Like they have to do what they have to do, and you have to play their game. That really is what it is. Sometimes it just seems like it's way more frustrating than what it is. But they're also trying to service the roughly, I think it's 18 or 19 million veterans that are out there.
Yeah.
Now I know not everybody goes to the VA for care, but I mean it's a lot of people for
Yeah.
them to have to service every year. So in lots of different capacities.
So yeah,
So
that's the biggest thing is with planning. We want to make sure that everything is taken into account, so that we can make sure that whenever you do go to that job that is going to pay you more, that you know that everything is taken care of and that your compensation is going to be increased. You should be trying to get a promotion whenever you leave. You don't want a demotion whenever you leave. That's another thing that I've seen is someone who, it's hard to do 20 years and have 20 years of experience doing a certain job and then leave it and go do a different job. It is very, very hard. Now, I was an electrician for a year and a half, and honestly, for half of that, I was recovering from an injury. I could change lights, I could, change a fuse, but honestly, if you ask me to rewire your dishwasher, I don't know what I'm doing. So, me going and getting finance training is different than leaving being something in the Air Force for 20 years and then going and trying to do something completely different. Now, you do have that buffer system of being able to do that because you will have a pension. You will have that healthcare benefit if it's available for your area and things like that that can help you out. But ultimately, that is kind of the area that we see most veterans struggle with when it comes to the transition. But every transition is different. Every single one's different.
well, that it is, and it kind of leads into my next question because I'll aim this more towards the financial world because that's what we're talking about. But
Mhm.
figuring out the finances, beyond budget, because that should hopefully be pretty easy for most people to kind of take their income and do a simple budget. I hope. Um, the world of finance is difficult, right? It's difficult. It's confusing. It can be this complex thing. Some things are pretty simple. Some things are very complex. But what advice do you have for people to like kind of cut through that clutter in their mind to make sense of some things if they're interested in it and they're like, all right, okay, Corey, I do need to learn a little bit more about this. Maybe I've got some money packed away. Maybe I've got this TSP, or maybe I don't have anything. I just need to, start a plan, whatever. I just don't
Mhm.
know what it is, but I'm totally confused. Like, what advice do you have for them to kind of cut through that clutter, that mental clutter?
So, first thing is self-identification. Okay, so where are you at? There's typically, and I will use typically a lot here, stages to people's financial life. There is the budgeting stage, which is where you want to basically make sure that you're affording all of your necessary things. If someone comes to me and they want to spend 120% of their income every year and they don't see any other way of how they're going to live their life, then I
Got a
can't help.
problem? Yeah.
Yeah. Then we get to whenever you can start stashing stuff away, we get into the asset accumulation or wealth accumulation stage. And
Right.
that is,
Now you can say, hey, you got a little extra here. What do we want to do with it?
yeah. And that is
Right.
usually where we see someone who's leaving the military at age, in after retirement, that should still be your phase that you're in because most of that qualified money, if you did 20 years and you got in at even 25 and you're getting out at 45, any qualified money, which is anything that is in a traditional TSP or a Roth TSP, you get a 10% penalty if you take it out before 59 and a half. That is the number one tax qualification that you should know if you're talking about investing and stuff. Now, there are different ways for you to take that money out for hardship withdrawals, or you might be able to take it out for education expenses and things like that. But there's a lot of red tape on those. And so we typically we still want to be accumulating wealth while we leave. Then we start getting closer to that retirement age to where we can start pulling it. And maybe we get 6, 7, 8 years out. And that's when we get into the wealth preservation stage, or the asset preservation stage. Then we get into, that's when we're going to start trying to pull back, be a little safer, and we can kind of get into some stocks and bonds stuff to kind of discuss that. And
now you're talking about managing risk, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, see if I can articulate this well enough. What you're investing in might be a little bit safer stocks and bonds that are not going to be as volatile in the market, so you don't potentially lose everything because you're close to retirement. You don't want to be like, oh, hey, I got $100,000 in here that I got invested, but I'm going to gamble it on this hot new AI technology startup that fails tomorrow, and now you're broke.
Yeah.
You want to invest it in something that's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like a blue chip company, something that's been around for 50, 60, 100 years. It's steady, it's consistent. That in 5 years, pretty darn good chance they're going to be there still.
So we can get into this piece. I tested a lot on it. I did a lot of different tests that had to do with it, and it's the basis of most of the financial industry now when it comes to investing and investment styles. And it's called modern portfolio theory. It was developed by a guy named Harry Markowitz in the 60s, I believe. It ended up winning a Nobel Prize. And it's basically the idea that you want to have a diversified portfolio of stocks. And whenever you want to mitigate your risk and you want to start moving from that asset accumulation side to that asset preservation side, we want to start moving more towards bonds. Now, bonds are the difference between a stock and a bond, real quick. A stock is ownership in a company, meaning you own a piece of that company. So the example I usually give at seminars and webinars and everything is, if you have $10,000 and you buy $10,000 of a share in a $1 million company, you own 1%, right? If that company is a value type company, they will pay you a dividend for owning that 1%. So they'll pay you, depending on how many shares it is and all that, they might pay you 50, 80, $100, something like that every year. Your value of the company probably won't go up because they're spending their earnings on keeping you happy.
But you might be able to take your spouse out for a nice steak dinner, maybe if you're lucky.
And then we have growth companies, which might, the biggest, most famous ones are Amazon, Tesla, Google. Tesla's probably the most famous story for this in the past decade. But their job is they're not going to pay you anything. You gave them $10,000 to make their company better, and they're going to go take it and make that company better. Now you own 1%. And if the company is now worth $5 million, you can sell that 1% of shares for $50,000. So that's kind of the difference between a stock. That's kind of what a stock itself is. Now, what we do is the most famous index that we know is the S&P 500. That's the top 500 large cap companies, public companies in the United States. In order for you to, quote, lose all your money, every single company in the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the United States, would have to all go bankrupt within a 6-month period.
You're talking something
you have bigger problems.
Depression.
You have bigger problems going on in the world than what's going on with your 401k.
Yes, your targets. Your
Yeah,
Targets, your Walmarts, your Kohl's, your gas stations,
yeah,
they all just closed down. The world just collapsed.
yeah. That
Yeah.
means that we are in, some post-apocalyptic type of
Yep.
environment.
Whatever friend you have that's got a bunker under their house with all the prepper stuff,
That's who
you
you're
need to get to
calling.
be really close friends with them.
Yeah. So we use that type of stuff to diversify our in the if you're people here familiar with the TSP, the C share is the S&P 500. It mirrors the S&P 500. As it goes up, your money goes up. As it goes down, your money goes down. Now, the bond side is different. The bond would be I'm loaning the company money. So similar to a mortgage company would lend you money to own the house. Now, in this situation, you might put $10,000 in. You would get 10 bonds, and they might take 10 years to mature. So they will basically give you a rate of 4% or something like that. Pay you $40 or $400 a year, $40 per bond until year 10, and then they'll hand you your money back. Now, that's what we call simple interest because all you got was interest on the money that you put in. The difference between a bond and a stock is stocks pay compounding interest. So compounding interest is going to, if you get 10% on a stock, or we'll go back to that same number of 4%. So if you get 10,000, you get 4%, you get that $400 in year one. In year two, you're going to get 4% on 10,400, not
Mhm.
10,000. And that's where you can see the famous quotes from Albert Einstein, where he got asked, what's the most powerful force in the universe? And he sat and thought for a second and said compounding interest. Because it can, Warren Buffett's a great example. Warren Buffett's worth like $200 billion. He made more than half of his, over 75%, I believe, don't quote me on this 100%, of his net worth, he made past the age of 60. And that's because his number was compounding on a larger number than it was before. So that's an area of, if you're also kind of in that 40s and 50s range, if you got more than 10, 15 years before you can pull your money out, before you can use it for anything anyway, because you don't want that 10% penalty, you probably want to be more aggressive and be in that stock side and just kind of ride the roller coaster that you're going to get. So that's kind of my typical education that I'll give to some vets that come in and they're like, well, I moved all of my money to government bonds because I don't want it going anywhere. And I'm like, but you can't touch it for 15 years. So it's never going to go up. You're like, right, it's not going to go down, but it's never going to go up either. And
And the
we see
stock
it
market,
as,
correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the stock market, if you look historically, at least the S&P 500, I mean, it's gone consistently up. It's obviously there's risk. There's a risk to
yeah,
almost everything, but you're relatively safe.
yeah. So time
Relatively.
horizon is the best. Time horizon is the best risk mitigator when it comes to stocks, specifically being diversified at least. So when it comes to that, we're looking at uh, your time horizon. If it's 15 years, we've seen we got 97 years of S&P 500 data right now. Um, in that time, there has been 6 years from January 1st to December 31st where we have seen more than a negative 20% return. So the market's gone down 20% or more. Now, 2008 is, I believe, the most recent example of that, where we were down about 30%. The market has gone over, returned positive 20% or more 36 times. So if you decide I'm going to be way more conservative, even though I have 15 years left until I can take this money out, yeah, you're probably taking away that bottom 20%. You're taking away those 6 years, but you're also taking away that 36 years, which is almost a third of the years in the S&P 500 that you could be invested in making that money back. Now, typically we look at 8 years that we start sliding that scale towards that bond side to reduce that volatility.
But
Now,
if you look at 97 years, and you said 36 were more than 20% and 6 were more than 20% down, that's still, math off the top of my head, that's still a little bit more than, we're pretty close to 60% of the years was still pretty
in
solid
between.
growth, somewhere in between. So, like I said,
And
it's
I
pretty,
almost had to
pretty,
change that last year because the
yeah.
S&P was down 18.8, but I didn't have to change it yet. So,
But
uh,
still, I mean, it's because I've seen some charts and stuff on it. It's
mhm.
consistent over time. But if I get it right on video here, but anyway, camera angles. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's not something you want to go trading every day and stuff like that. There's risk there probably, but it's
yeah.
you buy it and you hold it, and you should see for the most part growth. Obviously,
Yeah,
but
that's called day trading whenever you decide to cop in every day and change your companies, make your trades. The big thing with that is if you're doing it in a what's considered a brokerage account. So there's three main investment accounts. There's other ones that are like education and stuff like that. But the main account types are traditional, which is TSP has traditional, 401ks are traditional, you have traditional IRAs. These are tax deferred, meaning you're not going to pay taxes on it now, but you're going to pay taxes on it whenever you take the money out. Then there is Roth. Roth is kind of an area that I really push towards, especially military retirees, because you put in the money after tax, but you get the money out tax free. And if you're planning on, I'm going to work until I'm 59 and a half, and I'm going to start pulling this money out because I have this pension. Well, because of that pension, your tax bracket is going to be higher than someone who doesn't have a pension. So when you're taking out this traditional money, your tax bracket then goes up even higher. And then that can make it to where your Social Security starts getting more taxed. And that's where we start seeing people come into our office and going, hey, why did I pay this much in taxes this year? And it's like, well, here's your reasons. You didn't expect that you thought Social Security was tax free. That's not true. And if you're in the state of Missouri like I am, the state of Missouri will tax your Social Security as well. If you're in the state of Illinois like you are, they do not. But that's kind of an area where there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to how that is managed for people. So that's another area where we want to, it's not just planning for investments, but it's tax planning for being tax diversified as well, not just being stocks diversified and bonds diversified. So that's kind of an
well,
area that we look at a
you
lot of.
do have to keep an eye on what the government's going to get in their piece, right? Because we all know they're
No,
going to get their piece of the pie.
taxes don't usually go down.
No, no, definitely not.
I mean,
Well,
especially
yeah, not
income.
usually.
No,
I mean, it'd be
very
great if
rare.
they did, but I wouldn't count on that. I mean,
No.
that's why. Um, yeah, I mean, you should I think about that. Do you want to get taxed on it now, or do you want to get taxed on it later? Especially if you're, 30, 40 years old. Do you really want to get taxed on it in 20, 30, 40 years? You
Mhm.
know, I sit here and think like I have no idea what the taxes are going to be. Do you want to gamble on it? I mean, you could take the money down to the riverboat and gamble it.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Who knows what the tax rate's going to be? What's the government going to need in 40 years? I
Yeah.
don't know.
The other question I always do get, especially with people who are in their 40s, 30s range, is they don't think Social Security will be there when they get to retirement. And if you're out there listening to this podcast right now and you think Social Security, that's a pipe dream for me, I'm going to tell you right now, if the government were to get rid of Social Security, it would take an act of Congress to do so. If Congress if someone runs a political campaign on, I'm going to get rid of Social Security, guess what? They're not getting voted in because old people vote. And
And
they
young
aren't
people
going
don't.
to vote someone who's going to take away their income. That's
There's
not
stats-
smart.
and there's statistics to prove it that the older
Yeah.
generations vote and the younger ones don't. Yeah, and I've heard that many
Political
times too.
suicide is what that would be called if you decide you're going to get rid of Social Security.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard this so many times, and I'm the kind of person that's like, look, I believe it. I'll believe it when I see it, in the news, it passed,
Mhm.
whatever, okay, that's when I believe it. But, I'm the kind of person that's like, okay, hey, maybe it won't. Like, I'll just plan accordingly. Like, I'll just
Mhm.
try to plan, like, okay, maybe it's not. Just plan that way. If it is, great.
Yeah.
If it's gone, cool. I already planned for it. So,
And
I think you kind of answered some of my next question, but is there any other, I'll say, typical financial planning tools, that most people kind of employ? Because the meat of the conversation here, you got some ideas and some things you want to highlight that are lesser known, but you
mhm.
kind of talked about stocks, bonds, IRAs, things like that. Is there anything we've missed there?
Oh, there was one piece that I wanted to get on the taxes portion of a brokerage account. I didn't get to
Okay.
hit on that. So brokerage accounts do not have any 59.5 penalty or anything like that. But if you did decide to go and day trade and do that, anything that you gain on that is taxed at ordinary income. So if your income is taxed at 27%, because maybe you're really good at day trading, um, that's going to be taxed at 27%. And that's a very, very high tax bracket, as opposed to if you wait a year, it might be taxed at 15%. And 15% isn't nearly as bad as 27. So
Good,
that's one
good
other
point.
piece. And then cash flow in retirement is a big area that a lot of people want to make sure is good. Um, and then so but for people who have pensions or VA, if you get someone who they did 25 years in the reserves, then they worked government job besides that, they're going to have two pensions plus Social Security. And if you put your money into traditional, like we talked about earlier, not only is it a matter of, well, you're going to get taxed on if you pull that money out. Well, what if I don't pull that money out? Well, they have thought of that. The government thinks of almost everything. And these have RMDs, required minimum distributions, and they are going to they say, hey, you didn't pay taxes on this. It's time to pay some taxes. So they will force you to take money out. They will tell you it's either, it might be something like, well, your RMD is you have to take out $50,000 this year, and you have to pay your tax on it, which is going to be 19, 20, 34, or 19, 20, maybe 25%, something like that. So you pay that tax on it. And they say, well, but what if I don't? Well, they end up penalizing you 50% of whatever your RMD was supposed to be. So you end up having to pay 25,000 as opposed to maybe 10,000. So I don't know about you guys, but I prefer to give the government less money if I can. So that's as
20% sounds better than 25 or 30. So
yeah,
simple math. I'm no mathematician, but
yeah.
this
Um,
sounds better.
so there are certain products and stuff out there that can, if you're someone who is worried about, I call it Allen Iverson syndrome. All right. So for those out there who are basketball fans, you'll remember Allen Iverson was a amazing basketball player in the early or late 90s, 2000s, early 2000s area. And he signed a deal with Adidas. It was like $45 million or something crazy amount. His business manager knew that if there was $45 million sitting in his bank account, he was going to spend $45 million. And if you have that thought process and this is the self identification portion, if you know that if there's $200 in your bank account, that means you got 200 to spend, or there's 200,000 in your bank account, I got 200,000 to spend, then that is the perfect time to do what he did, which was they took that money, bought an annuity. He's getting 900 grand a year on it in income. Now, if you have $45 million, I can probably get you that. But most people don't. But if you know that you have that, then that's whenever that annuity side kind of can kick in and help out. Um, Annuities kind of get a bad rep because I would say 98% of them are kind of not great products. But they do have their place usually for most people, I would say.
Well, hey, if he was going to likely spend 45 million and he can get a return like that on it every year without spending his 45 million, I'd say that's a pretty good place to put the money. So
Yeah, that way he's not on one of the ESPN 30 for 30s for all
what
these
happened to
athletes that
Allen
are broke.
Iverson?
Yeah,
he's he's broke and he's a janitor in a school now or whatever.
yeah,
You know, I don't know. Like, yeah, no, you do see quite a bit of that of well, you see that with lottery winners too. You know, people win
hmm
all the money, they got all the take the lump sum, and you know, next thing you know, they're flat broke and don't have anything. So
yeah. And people
it's
will
the
come
problem.
out of if anybody out there is a lottery winner, people will come out of the woodwork. They will they will want stuff. You will find cousins you didn't know you had.
Make them
So
take DNA tests. Prove
yeah,
it.
yeah. Show me your 23andMe report. You know.
I
Um,
don't know if that's part of your financial planning speech to them, but you might want to add that. That might be a good idea.
yeah,
You know, make
there's
them
a
prove it through DNA tests before you hand over any money to them.
yeah,
So,
or just don't answer the phone. Change your phone number if you win the lottery.
yeah, hey, that's a good one. That's a good one. Change your phone number, move.
Yeah,
Don't tell anybody. That'd be the first step. Don't tell anybody and get a darn good lawyer.
that's
But
right.
anyway, but you had some a couple things here that you wanted to talk about, some lesser known stuff, retirement planning, some cash flow stuff, and some equity investing. So go ahead and break those down for us and give us a little education into those.
Yeah, so I think I hit mostly on the cash flow side where we would, we want to sit down and make sure that if you are deciding to retire and you are going to pull that pension and stuff, and we're going to start doing that, know what it looks like before you do it. And there's all sorts of softwares out there that can model it for you and show you what it looks like. Personally, what we use is a software called eMoney. It's owned by Fidelity, and I've been around this industry for 6 years, 7 years now, and it's the best one that I've seen. That's why I choose to use it. And then the other thing is, I'm a investment advisor representative as my title, and we get that title from I've passed certain certifications that give me the ability to say that I am a fiduciary advisor. I have to do whatever is in the client's best interest at all times. Unfortunately, there are people out there that still work in my industry that don't have that. And they basically are chasing the biggest commission that they can get most of the time. I'm sure you've seen it in real estate. You know that one guy who's selling people houses that they cannot afford, right? You got his name in your head right now. I can see it. These
I
people,
won't say it.
yeah. I hit on life insurance earlier as a piece. Most of these people will sell you a giant life insurance policy and then never talk to you again, because it's a transaction based thing, and they work for whatever life insurance company that's paying them to sell it, or whatever insurance company or whatever annuity company or whatever company. They work for them. They don't work for you. And that's an area that I would, if you're going to vet a financial advisor and you're trying to look into getting one and maybe see if your plan is as good as you think it is and you want to get a second opinion on it, first off, I would always say interview three different financial advisors and see which one fits you best, because most of it's a relationship based thing. And it's not a matter of just what does the plan look like, but it's also your plan. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything, right? That's the saying that we use in the military sometimes too. And planning is great, but we also want to make sure that our plan is going to be able to be executed, and that they're going to sit down with you once a year or maybe call you once every 6 months, something like that, where they can look at it and go, yeah, we like to think as financial advisors that we're going to be your first phone call anytime you decide to spend more than $2,000 on something, but we know that that's not the case. So it's good for us to call and be like, hey, what's going on with the family? What's good? What's going on with this? What's going on with this? Because we can make this plan last, and we can adjust and move with the plan. The plan should be alive, right? That's kind of the way I put it, where it should be a living, breathing thing. And the second you step out of the door after the plan's done, it might be out of date. There might be something that screws up with your life. And so having someone who's going to be consistently there is something that I would say, being in this industry, is something that you should value and looking for a financial advisor.
That's all good. I'll add another one to it because we're kind of in similar boats. And I definitely agree with three. It's a good rule of thumb for anything in this life, no
Mm-hmm.
matter who you're hiring. Interview three people, but assuming everything else is equal, you also want to make sure you connect with the person, right? It's assuming that let's just assume all the products are the same. That you want to make sure that that person's personality and the way they communicate just connects with you, right? Because you don't want to get into a position where you're working with somebody and you're like, man, this guy is weird. This guy's odd. Like, I just can't,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't answer their phone, or like, I don't know, just you're just like, I don't like this guy, whatever,
Yeah.
or gal or whatever. Like, you want to make sure that, like, hey, you know what? I not only like Korey, I like him, I trust him, he communicates well. Plus, hey, I like the products and services and everything else too. Like, it's like the whole picture. Like, it's all a know, like, and trust, like you said, but you want them there long term as well. So you want to be able to pick up the phone and know that, hey, this person not only cares for me, but the conversation's not going to be awkward
Yeah.
or weird.
Yeah.
It's going to be like you know, calling somebody you've known for a long time who's going to know you and get to know you and know what you really need, what's best for for you and your family and your situation. So
And that should be what you want as a client in this industry. You should want to be connected well with the people that you are working with. Because if you're not, then going to work every day and going, oh, I got to call Jim again and he's going to complain about the market like I can control a war in Russia. Like you don't want to work with those people and in my industry. So you want to make sure that you do have that connection and that relationship. And it's something that you build over time, but it's something that if it's not going well, don't be scared to pull the plug. If most people in my industry, if they've been around for at least 5 years, they're doing fine. You're not really taking a whole lot of food out of their mouth if you decide to move your money. Unless maybe you're one of their like 8 clients and they only have people who are super rich or something. I don't know. But one of the other products, like some of the examples of working with someone who is a financial advisor, one of the reasons why it can help is we do know different products that you might not see advertised. You might not see, unless you're watching CNBC every day, you might not have the knowledge or ability to know if it's for you or not.
that's a
And
big assumption that everybody's not watching CNBC every day, dude. I always have that ticket, up on my screen, always, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
I keep it on mute in the background just so I can see where the
Yeah.
market's going.
Of course you do.
Uh,
I'm sure you do, but
yeah,
99% of the rest of us don't.
no. And so when we see those things, you can, yes, putting money into I can give you some basic advice of putting money into a Roth, doing this, doing this, doing this. No, but when it comes to things like we had recently with the Secure Act 2.0, which passed in December, there's a lot of different rules and regulations that have kicked in that a lot of people don't know about. And there's some stuff that I've had to do with new military, soon to transition military members that, hey, because of this new piece, see if your new employer offers that. See if your new employer offers this. See if, one thing that I've seen thrown out a lot is people will try to get people to purchase life insurance policies for their children with the idea that they're going to use that cash value later in life for college education. And that was a piece that was thrown out a lot to a lot of different people. And it's a good idea, but now with the Secure Act 2.0, you can put that money into a 529 plan. And if they decide not to go to school, which was the biggest selling point for the life insurance policy instead, you can roll that money into a Roth IRA now. You couldn't do that before. And that changed 6 months ago. And that's some stuff that if you aren't on top of it, if you don't work in the industry, it's very, very hard for you to pick up on. And another piece is like there's one specific product that I use. I've used a good amount because I like it, and it fits a good range of people. It fits people who are currently leaving the military, and it fits people who are within 6 years of retirement, or they're within 6 years or more before 59 and a half when they can pull that money out. And we talked about asset preservation. You want to start moving to less risky stuff. And in doing so, you typically kind of cap some of your upside and by taking away some of that downside. Like we have one product, it's called a registered index linked annuity. There's multiple companies that we have used depending on the situation. They all have slightly different things with them. One might have a slightly different participation rate. One might have slightly different investment stuff. But for the most part, the one specific one I can throw out right now is you can invest in the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, international market, the social index one, which measures the companies that are doing things to help out the environment and things like that. If that's your thing, if it's not, I get it. But we kind of use it for like a tech lean sometimes. And things like that are what you can, emerging markets, I think, is the other one that they have with it. And this product costs $0, 0 cents. You just have to keep it in there for 6 years. It costs time. And if you can't pull the money out anyway, then, I mean, without getting that 10% penalty, then what does it matter? So it fits really well for people like that because you get the upside on it is, for specifically, I know for the S&P, for this specific one product that I'm thinking of that I don't want to mention 100% what it is, it caps at 400% over 6 years. So in order for the S&P 500 to hit 400% over 6 years, it would have to average 10% higher than its best year over that 6 years. It would have to average 67%, roughly. The highest year we've seen recently in modern history was right before the dot-com bubble, where we saw about 48.9%, I believe. So it would have to outperform that by a lot, and it comes with a 20% buffer. So if in that 6 years, the market's down 15%, you're down 0. If the market's down 22%, you're down 2%. If the market's up 100%, you're up 100%. So that's a product that people don't know really it's out there. It's not really advertised a whole lot, but it's a very, very good spot for the asset preservation stage of people's retirement and retirement plan. So that's a piece that if you don't know what's out there, you don't know what you don't know, right? So
That's a pretty good buffer, especially when you threw those numbers out earlier. 97-year history. What would you say? 6 years. There was less than 20%. So, hey, statistically speaking, and stats were not my strong suit at college, but
yeah,
that's pretty darn good protection against what's happened over the last 97 years. So, it's the odds are, well, nobody's going to live another 97 years, but it's a pretty good protection. If you're going to if you keep something like that for the next 20, 30 years. So
yeah, that's why we say it's specifically good for if you are, since it's a 6-year contract, right? So specifically if you're 52, you can't pull this money out until you're 59 and a half anyway. On 6 years, you're going to be 58. And we need to preserve this asset anyway because your retirement's coming up. But we don't want to kill that growth that can come with being invested in equities. So that's kind of the area that we typically see it work with. Or, if you leave in the military and you want to do something with that TSP money, I'll be honest, you could roll it to an investment plan that I do. I charge typically 1% depending on the situation. This is 0 charge. So it's a good way to also mitigate cost as well as mitigating risk and still keeping that growth. That's a big reason why I specifically like that product. And that's just an example of some of the products that a financial advisor, specifically mostly an independent, not all the time, but most independent advisors would know about. And the independence difference is I don't work for Merrill Lynch like I once did. I don't work for Edward Jones. We don't have as much red tape as some of those people. We also don't have nearly as much overhead cost. When I worked at Merrill Lynch, we had, we were in the business district of St. Louis. We had the top 14 and 15 floors in a skyscraper that looked great. And our office was really cool looking and everything. We had to wear a suit every day. Not wearing a suit anymore. I'm not doing that. But it was nice, but you needed to have a lot of assets under management and a lot of clients to be successful there. My business partner who I work with that's been in the business for 25 years, he's got 88 households. That's it. He only works with 88 people, and it's very easy to do annual meetings and stay up to date with these people and what they're doing. And he makes a very comfortable living and does well for himself. So that's kind of the nice part about being on the independent side as opposed to some of the bigger companies. So if you find someone who's an independent fiduciary advisor, those are typically the people that have access to the most products, can charge you a little bit less sometimes. I mean, I can't tell everybody what to charge, but they can usually work with you a little bit better, and they don't need as many clients as some of these big places.
Well, no doubt about it. I will say, as somebody not in your shoes, that everybody needs a plan. And you can't just get out of the military and just say, I got this money, I got this TSP, and I'm going to wing it. Because that is not a successful formula. That is not going to suit you well. Like I alluded to it earlier, like whether you get out of 30, 35, 45, whatever, you still have another 15, 10, 15, 20 years till your typical retirement age. Then you got another 10 or 15 years until, that
Life expectancy
the
type.
life expectancy, rate, which is, I think, like 78, something like that for guys. I have no idea what it is for women, but, you still have another 25, 30, 40 years left, hopefully, of life. And whatever you have in your TSP is not going to last you that long. You're going to need to go get another job. You need to have a solid plan. You can't just go wing it. Just like your transition, just like your job and going to get that and anything else in your life, you got to have a plan. And also, I didn't have a financial planner until, gosh, like 3 years ago, I think, something like that. I'm in my late 30s. So, it's important. Like you really have to think about it. You really have to
Mhm.
plan it. So it's important,
What's
and gosh,
the
I should have done it myself years before that.
what's the saying?
But I
Failing
didn't.
to
So
plan is planning to fail.
exactly,
Yeah.
every year that goes by that you don't, and you don't have that solid plan, you don't have that person you're communicating with, every couple months or at least every year that you're reviewing things and saying, here's where I'm at, here's what's happened in the last year, here's where we need to adjust things. Where are you pushing that needle? Like where are you going to end up, especially if you're farther out? If you're like you're
Mhm.
just talking about this product that's, say, 6 years out. 6 years isn't that long.
Mhm.
But if you're 40 and you just retired and you got 20 or 25 years till your full typical retirement, that's a long time. And
Mhm.
if you procrastinate and you put your money in the wrong place, you're gonna really set yourself up for disaster. There's a lot of things you can do wrong. A lot of things.
Yeah.
So you have to talk to somebody. So I guess that's my point is whether you reach out to Corey or you find somebody in your own neck of the woods, whatever, Corey, I'm going to throw your stuff back up there. All
Mhm.
your stuff will be in the show notes too. But man, you got to have a plan. I can't, I'm doing the foot stomp, military instructor foot stomp, pound the table, those kind of things. You definitely have to. You definitely got to have a plan.
Yeah, that's definitely, and I kind of want to real quick hit on the one of the stats that we've had in some seminars that I've always liked for explaining how long you have to prepare for when it comes to retirement. So let's say you retire at 62, the average life expectancy of a non-tobacco using couple, and this was Social Security data from 2021, I believe. I'll put it in, I'll give you the exact notes later. But the average life expectancy of a couple that is 62 years old is 92, meaning one of you two, on average, will live to 92 years old. So if you retire at 62, that is a 30-year retirement that you have to be prepared for. And if you're only prepared for the first 5, 10 years, then it can get hairy real quick, and you can end up on Social Security, and that's it. And that's not what we want to see.
Yeah. And I've, all my grandparents are gone, but I've, we I had one that went into a nursing home for a short period, another one that we explored that before she passed. But I've had clients go into nursing homes and stuff too. They are not cheap. They're going to
Mhm.
cost you. You might get
Average about
lucky and find some
170,000 a
facility.
year.
Yeah, you might get lucky and find something that's really on the cheap end. It could be, $2,000 or $3,000 a month, maybe real cheap and bare bones, all the way up to, yeah, it could be seven, eight, nine, $10,000 a month.
Yeah,
It just depends what kind of services, what they offer, how new the building is, where it's at in the country, all those different things.
and
That's extremely expensive.
there is stuff for that for people out there who are interested in trying to talk to somebody. I'm not actually licensed to sell long-term care because I don't have a health insurance license. But my father-in-law has always said, there's the people who can afford nursing homes. There's the people who the government affords your nursing home, is Medicaid, Medicare, they pay for it, and then there's everybody in the middle, and those people are screwed. Well, that's not completely true. If you're in the middle there, a long-term care insurance policy can cover almost all of your expenses as long as it's done properly and you do it right. So if you are someone who is worried about being in a nursing home for 3, 5, 6 years, because maybe something like Alzheimer's runs in your family, or Parkinson's runs in your family, something like that that can be a long-term uh, illness, you're either going to spend down all of your assets until Medicare and Medicaid kick in, or you can have an insurance plan that takes care of it. So those are that's my last little thought that I
Yeah.
can throw out before we wrap up here.
Either way, you got to plan for it, right?
Yep, that's
So
that's what we do.
that's the whole planning part, right?
Yep.
So anyway, Corey, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing with us. There's some good nuggets in there. I've
Thanks for
talked
having me.
about some financial planning a few different times here, and in a couple of years of doing this, but we've explored some new and interesting ways today, and that's really I'm really grateful that you kind of shared some new directions with us and the guests. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank
So
you for
before we
having me. I
go,
love opening up vets.
I shared the website, but any particular places where people can reach you?
You can get my email address, which is Korey at sdsmithfinancial.com, or you can call our office at 314-590-2120. We're located in Westport in the St. Louis area. So I'm licensed in Illinois, Missouri, and Hawaii, weirdly enough, and have no problem meeting on Zoom and virtual meetings and stuff like that. So if that is something that you're interested in and you do want to start a conversation, reach out to me on any of those channels, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably my number one social media that I use. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Or if you're nice enough and you buy him a plane ticket, he might meet you in person in Hawaii.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. I will
Hey,
100% take that 6
you're
hour
welcome,
flight.
Corey. If
Yeah.
anybody takes you up on that and you need a wingman to go with you, I got you.
All
Okay.
right. Sounds good to
Just
me.
saying. Okay. Because, hey, you need a battle buddy out there if you need any, whatever. So, anyway, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yep. There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, check out the website for all kinds of information and resources. And as I always say, if there's something not on there you think should be on there, please reach out and let me know. And if you are struggling with anything, please remember the National Suicide Hotline number is 988-PRESS-1, because the most important thing is we want you here tomorrow. That is the most important thing. You can also text 838-255 as well.